Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Made in New York Animation Project Mega Group. My name is Linda Sylvester, and I'll be your host for today. This mega group is scheduled to run from 3 to 4:30 p.m. But before we begin, let's go over some information about this webinar. This group will operate in webinar format. Attendees will not be able to turn on their video or a microphone during mega groups. You are counted in attendance as soon as you logged in. You do not need to follow up with us regarding attendance. If you lose connection, try to rejoin the webinar as soon as possible. You will still receive your incentive even if you get disconnected from the webinar. All right, let's get started. I'm very excited for this mega group today. Before we start, let's take a look at today's goals. So, first we'll have our opening ritual. Then we'll have group incentives information. Our animation industry guest speaker for today is Gigi Ng. Then we'll have our Q&A. Then we'll go into our closing ritual. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Natasha Amendolara, a drama therapist and workforce development manager at TAP. Welcome, Natasha. What's the opening ritual for today's group?
Thank you so much, Lyndon. It is so exciting to be back here for another mega group with all of you. And in every TAP group, we always start with an opening ritual that we engage in together as a group so we can enter the space together. And today we have a really, really amazing guest speaker that's going to be talking a lot about visual effects. And I always like to think of visual effects as kind of like that magical, super powered element that can be added to films and movies and stories. So today we wanted to know, what is your superpower? Because we all possess our own superpowers, even as humans. And so please interpret the question as you wish and think about what is your own individual unique superpower that you bring to life and situations. So we have posted a link in the chat. And if you just go directly to that link in the chat, you can answer the question. When you get to the link, you'll see the opening question and you'll see a space to type in your response. And we'll give everyone some time to click the link, think about your answer, and respond. And then after you submit your response, we will return right here to this Zoom space and we'll watch all of your superpowers come alive in real time.
And a lot of answers already.
Amazing. It did not take long to think of our superpowers. That is awesome. So what are we seeing, Lyndon?
So I'm seeing some invisibility, teleportation, intelligence, and kindness.
Wow, this is so cool. Super speed, adaptability, being reliable, funny. That's a very important superpower.
Mind control, flying, being invisible, super strength, open-minded.
Nice. My mentality. What a great response. Being tech savvy, having empathy, my helpfulness, hardworking, freeze breath. Very interesting. Oh, opening pickle jars. I love it.
Let's see, telekinesis, mind reading, my strength on the inside, nice. Being flexible with my schedule, transportation.
Nice. Empathetic, a lot of empathy here. The power to emote, kindness, understanding, hardworking, my beautiful face. These are all so, so wonderful just to see all of the superpowers we already possess. right here in this group. So thank you all so much for contributing these. I wish we could read every single one, but they are all really, really amazing. What a super group.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your amazing responses. Before we welcome today's guest speaker, let's review some information about scheduling and incentives.
So scheduling reminder, we are halfway through our summer mega group series, which is wild. We have 3 more mega groups left, including today's, and summer mega groups will continue through August 18th.
Incentive information. So, when will I be paid? You will be paid for the groups you attended on July 14th, 21st, and 28th by August 11th. You will be paid for the groups you attended on August 4th, 11th, and 18th by September 1st.
And who to contact if you have any questions about your incentive. Please reach out to tapincentives@theanimationproject.org. And that email address is also right there in the chat if you want to copy and paste that so you don't lose it.
All right. Now it's time to introduce our co-moderators for the guest speaker portion of today's mega group. Welcome back, Kat Goloski and Leo Andy Santana.
Thank you very much, Lyndon and Natasha. It's my pleasure to be joined by Leo this week as our co-moderator for this conversation with the lovely and talented Gigi Ng. Gigi is a VFX supervisor currently at Framestore, New York. She has an illustrious career that spans from her time having developed her career at the Mill, then having worked at the motion picture company, and now she is at Framestore. So welcome, Gigi.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. Welcome.
So it's such a genuine pleasure having you. You know, we're delighted. It's been a long time coming, I've got to say. Wanted to get your perspective. You know, if you could kindly share within this group of talented participants and attendees, I should say, how did you get into the industry? What's your story?
My story. So I went to I did a 5-year program with Tufts University in the School of Museum of Fine Arts. And so I have a degree in psychology, and then I have a BFA, and I was doing a lot of film and video stuff in school. And I got an internship at this place doing lots of different video things. And I got into doing a bunch of After Effects projects for them. And I was taking an After Effects class in school. So then I was really interested in, you know, putting things together, and I was always interested in like collage to like putting different elements together with my hands as well. And so after that internship had ended, I had done a bunch of other internships at various different film companies, but there's a filmmaker that I did some work for, and she said that she needed help with this reality TV show after after I was going to graduate. And I was like, well, she's offering me a job. And it was like this really weird show called Ding Dong Feng Shui, where the Feng Shui expert would come and Feng Shui your house. And so once I graduated, I was like, okay, this is going to be my job. And I think I only worked for a couple of days, and then the job got put on hold, and then the show never took off at all. It was by the same production company that did the first Queer Eye. And so people had high hopes that it was going to like take off and stuff. And so then there was a period of time that I didn't have a job. So I was doing a lot of temping, and I worked in a law office for a little bit. And then I applied to be a post-production assistant for Antiques Roadshow. And that's where I worked. I worked for WGBH, which is the PBS in Boston. And they had a spin-off show called Antiques Roadshow FYI. And which were like little cute little segments of like people going to different antique shops, or like it was just more storytelling instead of like, if you guys ever watched Antiques Roadshow, it's a big arena where people come and take their antiques to get appraised. And I actually went on the road with them, and it was really weird because, you know, I was in my early 20s and I was like assistant production supervisor, and I was telling all these people what to do, but I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And you know, actually got to get my friend's dad a ticket for when we went to Florida, and he actually ended up being on TV. Like his stuff got appraised, and it was a big deal because the guy who's the appraiser for the tools never got an aired segment before, because he never got like anything interesting, but my friend's dad's tools made it on TV. And then so after that, we were waiting to see if the Antiques Roadshow FYI show got renewed, and it didn't get renewed. And I was only hired on because there were 2 shows running simultaneously, and there's a lot of post-production work that needed to be done. So I was let go, and I had interviewed for a couple jobs in Boston at the time, one at another show at PBS and then at other different film companies. But I had always been interested in visual effects ever since I interned at that place. And I'd, you know, done all this coursework in After Effects. So I reached out to a friend of mine who I met through another like internship thing, and she was working at the mill. And so I trialed at the mill. At the time they were trialing for runners, which are kind of like PAs in the office. And I got hired into dispatch, which still I think exists at the mill, but doesn't really exist now because everything is digital. Back then it was like all tapes and film, and we would have to receive it. And like when things went on air, people would lay things off to tape and we would have to send it out. So that's where I got started. And then I like worked my way up kind of like apprenticeship style. And then, yeah, that's how I got into the business.
Thank you for sharing. And I'm conscious that you brought some spots that you've worked on more recently, whether it be as a VFX supervisor, as a creative director. I'd love for you to be able to share some of these spots, if you don't mind, within the space, and also, you know, talk us through any challenges you might have experienced as well throughout.
Sure. We're still finishing like the different versions. So I've been working a lot on, I think from my days at MPC, I started working on on this commercial for Dell. And then ever since then, I've had them as a client, and we've done commercials at Framestore for Dell Technologies, and this latest Dell Technologies commercial, the English version has aired, and now we're doing all these foreign language versions in CG. And I was the creative director on this. We did one last year where I was also the creative director on it. And then, yeah, so I can share this latest version. I can tell you what we did for this spot, because I don't think you would be able to know. Can you guys see this?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, let me make it full screen.
When technology is easier to use,
Here we go!
barriers don't stand a chance. That's why we'll stop at nothing to deliver our technology as a service.
It's my time to come alive.
So the challenge with this particular spot was that we had to, sorry, one second, let me just, should I stop sharing, Kat?
You can if you'd like, but no, please feel free to sort of jump in, because I'm conscious you might share a few other spots as well. So that's
okay. Well, I'll just keep it parked on this, and then I'll just talk about the spot I just showed. So the challenge with this spot was that they wanted to blow up these letters, and the post time that we had was only like a week and a half. And so what, I guess when you're thinking about how to actually shoot something, it's like you have to take into consideration like how much time on set it actually will take, and how much time it would take in post, and like what is the better route to do this in. Like obviously there wasn't much post time, so we're like, well for this you're gonna have to shoot it practical. You're gonna have to blow this stuff for real, blow up these letters for real. But the problem is that like once you blow things up, you have to like clean it all up. So it's like it was like this thing where it was like, well, how much time is it going to take them, and how much time is going to take us? And right now we're doing foreign language versions, which we're doing actually in CG. Like we're just making these things. We built all these letters in German and in French, and we're blowing them up. And what I love is like that when like things are done practically and it gets enhanced by visual effects and, you know, CG. And for this, the challenge was the client didn't want, so when they blew it up, there were like parts of the explosion. There were these fiery bits, and then there was all this interactive lighting that went on the walls and everything. And I guess they didn't want that. And we were like, what? And we had all this other work ahead of us too. I mean, there were all these like cranes outside the window that had to be removed because it was, you know, holding lights that were lighting the space. We had to combine several different explosions. Sometimes they shoot this explosion separately, not at the same time. And then of course the woman was shot separately for safety reasons, because you don't want things flying at her and hitting her. But then we had to remove like all these parts of like the explosion. And that was so challenging for us, especially for like the last shot where like an explosion would come. And then they actually shot the last shot with all of them at once. But when the first explosion happened, there was a bright white light. And so we were able to like get rid of that. But then the second explosion would come, but it would affect the first explosion. And it was just like this, it was very challenging. It was probably one of the more challenging projects I worked on because of the time we had to do it in. But we had a great team, and now we're doing the CG versions of it, and we're like using the practically shot version as a reference, which is great because like, well, you're like, this is what happens in real life if you blow this up, and this is how many bits of debris and how small bits here and all this other stuff. So in, you know, every day when we have our daily meetings, you're always comparing like the version to like what we had done, because like in CG, like we're like, oh, like these puffs of smoke are too chunky or something, you know? So
that actually hi Gigi, that actually brings up a good question. I know that a few of our audience members might have. It wasn't so long ago that I myself was a student, and it was always funny trying to explain to my parents what exactly I was doing. So being that it's relatively a new kind of industry, would you be able to explain the difference when you're between like special effects and visual effects? Because I know those terms always get intertwined.
Yeah, special effects is what like, you know, was done on set here. Like it's like practical things that you would do on set, and then visual effects happens afterwards with programs on the computer. And I remember, yeah, I thought my parents got what I did. I showed them a making of video once where I was like, see all this stuff that's here. This was not here. And they were like, oh, I was like, we made this. This wasn't here. And they're like, oh. And then if you showed like the making ofs, you know, that's pretty impressive. But now I think they lost it again. I don't think they know what I do now. So.
Yeah, I fully understand that. Every now and then I have to re-explain it to some family members. So another question of mine would be, what would be the simplest way that you find yourself explaining exactly what visual effects is?
I usually, if someone asks me what it is, a lot of people know what Photoshop is. like putting things together. I usually explain it as like collaging or photoshopping, but it's like through time. So you're like putting all these little elements together, like stacking them up, and then through time. And they're like, oh, okay. And sometimes I'll say, and I feel like most people nowadays with all the superhero movies understand green screen and blue screen. And so sometimes I say that and they get it. But I think it's really impressive when you do see making ofs of shots and you're like, whoa, I didn't even realize that this was all fake, essentially. I mean, that's the problem with our job is like, if it looks good, no one will notice it. So, but then you're like, but that's all my work,
Yeah, that's what I tend to find myself laughing when I'll ask somebody, do you see a dog in the scene? They say no, and I say exactly.
Yeah.
And you actually you're just setting me up for all these questions, which is great. You mentioned blue screen and green screen. I know that's another big question that a lot of my interns used to ask me. Would you care to explain?
So it's, blue screen and green screen is usually used when you can't film the person with the background that you want it to be for them to be in. And though those colors are used so that you can key it out and it basically extract the person from the background, and then you can put something else behind them, whether or not you shoot the plate, practically, and then use that, or you create it entirely in CG. For example, like I can show you the spot that we did for Dell. So for example, a few years ago, we first did these spots launching Dell Technologies. The one that I just showed you was for their new product called Apex. But when we did the first commercials for Dell Technologies, they wanted to shoot in the Dolby Theater in LA, and that's the theater where they hold the Oscars, right? And no one thought that this was going to be an issue to shoot in the theater, but then it became an issue and they couldn't go inside the theater. So we had to shoot all of this outside the theater in like a stage with blue screen and, well, actually, I don't think we might have used green screen, blue screen for some of it. And then some of it we just put behind. But anyway, the thing is that if I show you the spot, like Jeffrey Wright, who is Bernard on Westworld, is in the spot. He's not in this theater. We shot all the plates of the theater beforehand, and then we just put him in the theater afterwards. We shot him like in a, in another like sound stage with all this stuff, and then we combine the plates together. So I can show this as a good example of
Yeah, I remember this spot quite vividly, Gigi.
What does it take to make digital?
Hold on.
There is a slight delay we're noticing.
This is
What does it take?
I'm sorry, Gigi. You might actually be sharing a different screen. So you might want to like unshare and then reshare the screen.
Okay, let me try that. Yeah, I'm gonna show the latter of the two. We did like 2 rounds of Dell Technologies, and it was the same thing. Like we couldn't shoot inside the theater. We could get in there to shoot like the actual like angles and everything, but then we had to like combine everything afterwards. And I'll show the latter one. Okay. Can you guys see this?
Perfect.
What does it take to make digital transformation actually happen? Do you just flip a switch and presto, your business is magically transformed? Not quite. It takes a groundbreaking company like Dell Technologies, a family of 7 technology leaders working behind the scenes to make the impossible reality. For instance, we're helping to give cars the power to read your mind from anywhere. We're helping up to 40% of the nation's donated blood supply to be redirected to the areas and people that need it most. And we're even developing technology to create a whole new vision for the blind. So while you might not see what we're doing is changing the way we all see the world. Magic can't make digital transformation happen, but we can. Let's make it real.
So,
A golf club that only hits it straight.
oops. Yeah, there's like a bunch of commercials in the same vein, but like we couldn't shoot inside the theater, and so we had to shoot Jeffrey Wright and all this stuff separately and then combine it all later. But no one would, I mean, hopefully no one would ever know if we've done our jobs properly. But yeah, that's part of the reason sometimes when you shoot things against blue screen or green screen is because like you can't capture it practically together. So you have to do it separately and then put it together later, or you're doing something like really fantastical and you have to like create this environment in CG anyway. So you like shoot, I mean, if you see any of the behind the scenes, like for, Life of Pi or Alice in Wonderland, it's all shot on blue screen and green screen. There's like the only thing practical is like, for Life of Pi anyway, is like a small like pool that they put him in, and then everything else is just made up.
Do you, sorry, Kat, you could go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Leo.
I was just gonna ask, do you ever find yourself trying to find the seams or where it's not integrated as well as it could be within movies and commercials that you haven't worked on, some peers that worked on it?
Oh yeah, I do that constantly, and I think it's terrible because you can't enjoy the thing for what it is. I'm constantly being like, oh. But then in real life, you see things sometimes and you're like, oh, that looks fake, but it's real. For example, sometimes you'll look in the sky and you're like, oh, those clouds look really fake, but they're like actually real. They're like, oh, it looks really dark and the edges look weird, but it happens in real life. But yeah, a lot of times I think that's a curse of getting into this industry because like you end up like your eyes are very attuned to like if things are right or wrong or if they look composited or not real and stuff. But then on the other hand, I think if the story is good enough, maybe you're sucked into the story, you won't notice that as much. So I think, yeah.
Kind of want to get a sense, Gigi, as well, and thank you for that explanation. Like, what does your role look like as a VFX supervisor when you work on this sort of project? When it comes to the shoot, when it comes to the post side of things, how's your role interwoven within that project?
So as a VFX supervisor, when you go on set, first of all, everyone hates VFX supervisors. So if you want to get into this business, you're going to be hated on set. No one likes you for the most part because production runs on like a very tight schedule and you're always being like, oh, can you do this? Or like, oh, can you guys stop the camera so I can like take a bunch of pictures? So, and like everyone's just, but at the same rate, like you can be very helpful on set because if they run to an issue, like your role there is to basically whatever effects that you think are going to happen that you have to, do later on in post, you're there to make sure they shoot it correctly. So that when you get the material back that you have what you need. And then while on set, you're taking, a bunch of reference photos, you're taking HDRIs, which are like 360 photos to help with lighting if you're doing CG, taking measurements, and then putting on tracking markers on things that if you need tracking markers for. And you're also there to advise. And sometimes things will like happen on set where they didn't know what was going to happen. And then they're kind of looking to you for the solution. And you're like, okay. And you have to react on the spot right away. And you'll be like, and sometimes you can save the day, like, which is really nice because you're one of the most hated people on set. Sometimes you can be like, oh, hey guys, like if you shoot it this way, and it's not a big deal to you in post to do it, but it saves them hours, like setting up cameras and setting up lights, then they're going to be like really grateful that, that you were there to suggest that to them, And then afterwards, the process goes, after the shoot wraps, there's like editing where, you know, they edit the spot. I usually work in commercials. I don't work. I worked on his Dark Materials last year for several months. And Framestore has a TV department, but in the pipeline of commercials, our pipeline has been in post-productions, like once the shoot wraps, gets edited, then it gets graded or colored. Sometimes it gets graded or colored later, depending on the schedule. But most of the time it gets graded or colored beforehand, like the look that they want to give the commercial, whether or not they want it to have, a 70s vibe or like whatever kind of, color aesthetic they want it to have. And then it comes to us, and we basically put together all the graded material into an edit. And then we're like, okay, so what needs to get done? And then as a VFX supervisor, you're basically managing a whole team of artists to like get all the work that needs to get done. And then you're the last person, if you're working commercials, you're the last person, you finish it and then you send it to a distribution house and it gets on air. So you're the last step. And so it can be quite stressful at times because you're really under a deadline if they're, if it's going to air for, and a lot of times the air dates are made so to tie in with like big events like the Olympics or, the Grammys or the Oscars or something. And so it has to get out at a certain time. And, you, before the shoot, you decided like what work needs to be done, and you assessed how many days and how many artists you need for this project. But then things always change because like that's like best case scenario before the shoot. But then once you're on set, like something that was unforeseen could happen. And then you're like, oh no, and then you have to figure that out afterwards.
So that actually brings up one of my questions. And before I continue, I just want to remind everybody in the audience that feel free to submit your questions if you really want something answered. Like my question, for instance, would be how would the VFX supervisor differ from let's say a creative director?
That's interesting because I've been doing a bit of both, and so the lines are a little bit blurry. But the creative director is more responsible for like how to like further the creative of the actual project, like with certain like aesthetic decisions and like what else they can do to like elevate it even more. And they work a lot with the clients and bounce ideas off each other and everything. But because I've like developed a relationship with our Dell clients, I feel like I was doing a little bit of that before anyways, before I creative directed like a bunch of these commercials. Even as a VFX supervisor, like I feel like I don't know, I think it's not, I don't think it's I think everyone has like creative opinions all the time. And I think it's important, like even if there's a creative director attached to a project, some creative direction at Frames. If you're a creative director at Framestore, you direct your own thing sometimes, and then also like oversee creatively other projects, but you're not on the machine, you're not on the box. Whereas like I do both. So it's hard for me to like separate that because I like being hands-on and I like knowing, like, I still like making pictures. So I don't know if that will change in the future, but.
We're getting questions from the chat. One from Henry, who asked, where do you get your inspiration, your creativity for the VFX work that you produce?
Where do I get my inspiration? I don't know, like I feel like I have a lot of other interests outside visual effects. Actually right now I've been like doing a bunch of painting. I have a side baking business. I bake a lot of cakes.
She makes incredible cakes, everyone. So you should follow her on Instagram.
Thanks, Kat. Thanks, Kat. I need to up my followers. So I get, I think just like looking around in the world, I think it's funny. Sometimes I'll like be walking through, I'm trying to be more present in life in general. And so like, I remember this thing my dad told me. He's like, he would always say like, he's like, notice everything whenever you're around anything. Like you can get inspiration from anywhere, you know? And so, you know, even if I'm like taking a walk or anything, I'm always trying to notice things about what's around me and like how that will like, and then like later on when you're doing projects, you're like, oh yeah, that thing I noticed, like that's how I can use that in this project or something like that. I think people can draw inspiration from a lot of different areas just by like being present and aware.
Amanda asks, oh, sorry, Leo, you gonna go?
No, I was gonna read what Amanda asked. Also, you could take it away.
Oh no, please, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So Amanda asked, what do you find is one of your greatest strengths within VFX, or what strengths do you believe VFX gives to a production?
I think that, so what my greatest strength is, or what does VFX adds, what VFX adds to production? Two questions?
Yeah, I think it's a two-parter question. So what strengths or that you always could rely on within your kind of skill set, and where does it lend itself within the production?
For me, I think one of the greatest things about VFX is that, you know, like you're working with the team. So I feel like I as like, you know, if you're a VFX supervisor, you know, like you're in charge of all these people, and it's trying to like take, you know, opinions and inspiration from each person and make sure everyone gets like heard, and that makes for a better project. You know, you're not there to be a dictator. You're there to like help everyone make this thing that you're working on. And, you know, visual effects, you're working really long hours sometimes, like insane amount of hours. I have one of my best friends is a doctor, and she's like, you work more than I do. So like, and she works like 72 hours straight on, you know, a call delivering babies, and she thinks I work more than she does. So it's like this weird, you know, kind of family that you have, and you know, everyone kind of has to get along, and everyone, you know, like everyone should feel like they're contributing somewhere. And so I feel like, I guess, hopefully one of my strengths is that like I try to make sure everyone like feels included, and like that their voice is being heard, and that everyone is, you know, feels like thanked that they're working on this, even though if it's their job. And then in terms of like VFX adding to a production, I don't know if there's like anything that's put out in the world right now that doesn't have a little bit of visual effects. Like there's nothing. If you watch any movie, and I watch movies to the end and I always look at the credits, there's always visual effects. Even if it's like a random movie that you're like, oh, what did they do here? There's always something. There's always like, oh, we removed this and this and this, or and you wouldn't know. So like I think visual effects helps, like, you know, the storytelling of things, and how, you know, if people can't get to certain locations, and now they're doing lots of things with, you know, with the LED screens, and with people not being able to get to actual locations, and like shooting things that way. But then you would have to like either create those, it's almost like post-production, pre-production now. You're like creating all these things beforehand so that they can use it on set. And with the advent of like Unreal, where things can get moved around in real time, like I think it's gonna, you know, I think it's changing how productions run, for sure.
Yeah, we have a lot of ton of questions coming into the chat, but I still have a few of my own. So before I forget, one of my questions for you is, if you weren't in post production, if you were to restart your education and not go into the same direction that you went, would you, what other area within the pipeline would you have pursued?
Like within post-production?
Within the pipeline in general, including pre-production, all the way from CG and so.
I think, well, I directed a couple of things at Frame Store. So like being a director, but actually more than a director, like I think production design is really awesome. Like I remember being on this set once and the speed at which they build things and like design things, and then, you know, you're responsible for creating, you know, this world. And I think that would be what I would be most interested in besides directing, I think, would be that.
One thing I wanted to ask about, Gigi, and you sort of touched upon being more present, particularly within this industry, and I noticed that some questions that we're getting in the Q&A reflect that quite a bit. Gabby actually is asking, and hello, Gabby, some familiar names within this chat. How do you manage your time between, and this is something I always wonder about you too, having known you for years now, like between the VFX job, baking, and all of your other hobbies, how do you manage a balance? And I think that's so important to name these days.
I don't get a lot of sleep. I don't sleep very much. No, I don't know actually. Everyone always asks me that because like I do a bunch of other things too. Like I'm involved in my community garden. I'm like president of my condo board. I just have like a lot, and I'm like in this activist group. There's just like a lot of stuff going on. And I think, yeah, I don't get a lot of sleep, although I've been trying to sleep more and be better about it. But I'm also trying, like, I have like a lot of different things I'm interested in. But I think prioritizing, like, I've been prioritizing like being active, like exercising, meditating, things that actually help me feel good. And I think a lot of times we're really in our heads about things, and like just getting more into like body things have been helpful. And then just staying in tune with like what, for me, it's hard to like do things if I'm not really excited or into it about it. So I'm trying to only do things when I, you know, there'll be lulls where I'm not baking as much. Like right now, actually, I was painting a lot during the beginning of the pandemic, and then I stopped and I just picked it back up again. But it's, for me, it's hard because I'm like, whoa, where did that interest go? It just kind of like died for a little bit and then it came back. But now that like I'm like into it, it's actually really enjoyable, and I'm just trying to like ride this wave for a little bit. And I do think that, especially in this industry, it's easy to like become a workaholic. And so trying to draw some boundaries, and it's hard too with working from home, trying to draw some boundaries between work and personal life. Because like, as they said, like no one on their deathbed said, I wish I worked more. So you have to take care of yourself and like what you're interested in. You only have one life. So
yeah, that's beautifully said. And Leo, I actually would like to turn the mic on you as well, because as a fellow industry professional, curious to hear a bit about how you balance your hobbies, because a lot of, you know, having known you for some time as well, you know, you also have a lot of passion projects as well. So would love for you to speak to that too.
Yeah, I like keeping myself busy. I also don't sleep a lot, but it's partially because when I am sleeping, I have an idea that I want to either jot down or keep myself busy. But if I do find other hobbies aside from art, I like it to be physical, something completely away from the computer, as far away as possible.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to work with your hands. That's the problem, because like, it's not the problem because like if you're interested, like, you know, you have ideas for like short films, but then you're like, but I already work my whole day in front of a computer, and then like, do I devote more screen time? And but but then I feel like if you do other things that might inform what you want to make later on. So I think,
Yeah, I think what a lot of people, hopefully our audience understands, is sometimes having more stuff on your plate is actually comforting, because once you and Gabby asked, I'll answer it, then I guess I'll pass it off to you, because Gabby asked, do you experience burnout? Because Gabby also doesn't sleep a lot. And to my answer is, when you have a lot of stuff on your plate, when you experience burnout on one thing, now you get to turn that part off, and now you get to focus on the other things that you have on your plate. Since you're always trying to keep yourself busy, you're not gonna have a burnout on any specific thing, since you're always bouncing around.
yeah, I mean, I've definitely experienced burnout at work. I mean, actually on this project that I showed you at the beginning, that like explosion project, I was so tired for some of it that I was like, I'm at my limit. Like I knew I was at my limit. I was like, I'm at my limit. I'm really, really tired. I don't think I can, like after like working for 18 hours straight or something like that, I'd be like, okay, I'm done. But in terms of, yeah, I think it's also like, I think it's really important to take rest and people, I think because of where we live in New York, and it's like, go, 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 hustle, hustle, like kind of like this crazy culture, and people like there's been articles about people saying they're like crazy busy, and it's like some sort of badge of honor. It's like, I think it's important to take rest. I mean, I'm taking a whole month off at the moment. I have this whole entire month off, and I think it's important to rest, and if you're not even doing anything, you are doing something. Like the ideas are percolating or whatever. Your body needs this. Like listen to your body and what it needs.
Adding to that, Jaden is also, obviously the themes of mental health are very, very important, particularly as we put in so much in the way of our hours into this sort of job and experience. And Jaden is asking, it seems like this job could be quite mentally taxing. And how does one adapt, particularly when you're working those long hours, or when you're, working on a project where the clients might be quite difficult? How do you manage that?
How do you adapt to say
like, or just being that it's it's a mentally taxing job sometimes, or it seems that it could be, how do you adapt to it in that sense?
I think it's because I've just worked in it so long that I've like, but it's not, I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing that I can actually work for so many hours straight without, it's not good for your health, like I think I've adapted to it because I started when I was young, and now I'm here, and like my body and everything has gotten used to it. And mentally, I think, it's hard too, because like I don't know about other people, but throughout my childhood and in school and everything, I'm a perfectionist. So I want to make things look really great, and but at the end of the day, we're not saving lives. It's a commercial, it's a TV show, or it's a film, and it's not more important than your mental health or your physical health. So at some point you just have to like, make sure you know what your limits are and stand by it. And, if you, I think therapy is a great resource. I think having like a close network of family and friends that you can talk to is great. And yeah, at some point you're going to have to like draw some boundaries of like, this is how much work is going to take up of my life. And then everything else is for me and for my family and my friends and my other interests.
So a question came into the chat that I'm curious about. Being that we have to put time aside for your personal life, what happens when Ariel asked, have you ever come close to not meeting or missing a deadline? And if so, how was that resolved? And how did you settle or push the deadline?
We've never missed a deadline. See, that's the thing. People are like, you get like super nervous. It always gets done. It always does. It just always does. Like you have a team of people working behind you that's within your company and they're not going to let it not finish. It's either if there's some like unforeseen circumstance, like sometimes like the deadline gets pushed or something, but it always gets done. I don't know. I can't think of a time where it hasn't at all, which is weird because like you go into a project and you're like, how is this going to get done? And you always ask that question, but it always does. It just, I don't know. It's just like this weird magic that happens because you have tons of people working together and you're just gunning for it. And I think as a VFX supervisor, that's part of your job is to like get it to the finish line. And, you know, maybe sometimes there will be compromises. Maybe like there's like a shot that you don't like as much, but like to the layman's eye, are they going to notice that there's like a dark edge around this? I don't know. Like no one will know. It's just like, it just has to get done and it always does.
Isaiah asked, what is your favorite part of VFX?
My favorite part. Well, I mean, I love in terms of, I guess,
I think as far as like task. So I think more so in the realm of like grading or kind of like rotoing or mask, you know what I mean? I guess in terms of VFX.
Well, I mean, I'm a compositor, so I mean that's my favorite part to like, because I put together everything and I make the whole picture. I think my favorite part of like of all VFX projects is like things that involve like character animation. I mean, like Framestore has had the Gecko account forever, the Geico Gecko, and then I don't know. I like talking animals. I like characters in general. But yeah, compositing is my favorite part of visual effects. And that's why I went into it. I like putting together different elements and making it.
And that lends itself to Naomi's question, which is, have you ever worked with character animation in VFX? And how was that experience? And to add, how does that differ than working with an actual live cast?
I have done some jobs with characters. Like one of the commercials I worked on, like the first Dell commercial I ever worked on was character work. I can show that if you guys want. Or I don't have to. I don't know. What do you?
Yes, please. It would be great to see
Okay.
it. I definitely.
This spot is really old, but it's still one of my favorites because it's like character based. Hold on. Does this show up? The Del Thomas spot?
This is the story of Thomas and the alternate universe. Every evening at exactly 6:07, District Manager Thomas M. Wilkes stepped into a rather different world. This world did not abide by the rational humdrum rules of the one we live in. There, within his grasp, lay the power to make anything happen. But then, nothing was happening. Sometimes inspiration comes slowly. Sometimes it comes as fast as a stampede from a world far beyond anything. My name is Thomas M. Wilkes, humble creator of an alternate universe.
Adorable. So cute.
Yeah, so that's like one of my favorite projects because it involved like character stuff. It involved like practical effects. Like if you look at the behind the scenes, like, so all those, the frog and the rabbit are actual people and they had like practical hands that they made, but then they would wear, all the heads were CG and they wore this like helmet with like all these like sticks out of it with balls and everything. And then we did all the character animation and, you know, CG of them in post. So it was like, it's one of my favorite projects because it combines like special practical effects and visual effects and like character stuff, which I really enjoy. And yeah, I don't know. I've done recently, like also Framestore does, and we worked on it. I don't know if I can share it because it hasn't aired yet, but we did, but like there's older ones, but we also do in addition to the gecko, the Geico gecko, we do this character for Zyzal, which is this allergy medication. And there's an owl. So like I worked on that as well. Like this, he's wearing like a nightgown and like a little robe, and he's going to bed and he has like a little hat on, and it's so that was really cute. That's the last character thing I did this year.
Yeah, and they look great. I have a question here from Lord Blackburn. I'm trying to understand it. Says, how do the artists organize as, I'm guessing, VFX supervisor? So I guess how would the VFX supervisor organize the artist?
Well, the team is usually broken up into, you have a producer that helps manage this as well, but if you need CG on your team, there's also like a CG supervisor, and then CG has like a bunch of different departments. Like there's people who are within the asset department that model things. Then there's the rigging department that rigs the models for the animation. Then there's lighting and effects, if there's any effects. Like for example, for that first commercial I showed with the explosion, that's part of effects because it's a simulation of smoke and explosions and debris. And then on the 2D side, it's because I'm on the 2D side, there's your different compositors and their different seniority levels. And then there's paint work, which involves like paint and roto. So rotoscoping. Does everyone already know what rotoscoping is? Should I explain?
Please do. I think that might be helpful to our audience because I think this is a nice segue into, we do have a lot of really interested participants who are really keen to pursue compositing as a skill set. So I think speaking to that would be helpful.
Yeah, rotoscoping is like basically cutting out something frame by frame, and you don't have to do it frame by frame because the software that you use can animate between keyframes, but you cut it out so that you can put it on top of something else. If someone's shot against blue screen or green screen, that's called keying, where you can like basically extract them via the color that they're against. So like there's paint and roto work, and paint work is a lot of times like removing this, or it could also be adding things as well. I mean, it gets to be like, I feel like paint and compositing usually involves like either taking like 2D practically shot elements or like CG created elements and like putting them all together into like the final picture for the shot. So in terms of the team, that's how it gets kind of structured. And then some jobs only have 2D. There's no CG, like you don't have to make anything in CG. So then you only have 2D, but there's always like a producer helping you manage and they liaise with the client and like help with notes and just general organization. And so that's how usually the team is organized.
Expanding upon roto and whatnot, what I wanted to get a sense from your perspective, what are some key things that our participants can do to help arm themselves to become talented compositors such as yourself? Like what are some softwares that they could sort of focus on, or what are some tips and tricks that you can perhaps offer them so as to help brush up on their skills or focus on the training side and learning a bit more about the world of compositing?
Well, I always say, like, it's funny, like, so I trained up as a flame artist, which is a certain type of software. And I also know how to use Nuke, which is this other type of software. And there's like almost like this weird tension between like Flame artists and Nuke artists and like what program is better. But a compositor is a compositor. It's like, it's just, you know, it doesn't matter really what software you use. The way I like to look at, and I think it goes back to like just noticing the world around you, is that like if you look at a shot and you're like, if your eye gets drawn to something, it's supposed to look complete and you're not supposed to focus on anything in particular. And then that's how I think things are done when something is done. If you're like noticing something, I guess, no, but that's not always the case, because sometimes you want your eye to be directed to a certain part of the picture. But if you're noticing something, you want to ask yourself, why am I noticing it? It looks out of place for some reason, whether or not it's like, oh, this looks too sharp. Maybe I needed to focus it, or like, oh, this might be the wrong color. It should be more green and less blue or something like that. And so like when you're watching it, like your eye will, like, that's how you just train your eye. And that's why I don't really believe in like adhering to a specific software, because it's all about like how good your eye is. People always talk about the eye, and you know, when the more you do and the more you watch things, you'll start to notice, you're like, that looks out of place. Like, why does that look out of place? And then you'll like do something to it and you're like, okay, that doesn't look out of place anymore. And then just keep refining and editing until you're like, okay, so like this looks, this shot, and you play it over and over and you're like, okay, this looks okay now. Nothing is like standing out and it looks like it all melds together. And so that's how I like think when I composite something. Like that's how I go about it. And it's also funny too, because it changes throughout the lifetime of a project. If you go through your older versions, like this happened to me when I was working on His Dark Materials. We were like, I was trying to set up like the whole environment, like the whole sky, this dark, stormy sky environment for this whole sequence in one of the episodes. And we worked on it for so long. That project went on for a lot longer than I'm used to for commercials. And I look at, you know, when I first do it, I'm like, this looks great. This is amazing. And then you just keep refining. And then you look back at like version 1 and you're like, this looks terrible. How did I think like this looked great to begin with? But it happens to me every time. Like you do it and you keep refining and then you like go back to a previous version. That's not to say like sometimes like you do the best work at it. Cause like sometimes clients were like, oh yeah, let's go back to like version 1. And you're like, what? We just went on this whole journey and we're like 55 versions deep now. And you want like that other version I made. So that's not to say like your first instinct isn't like always the best, but I'm saying like there always, I like cycling through the versions that I've like composited. And then you're like, oh my God, I thought that was good. And it wasn't, but that's your eye even evolves as a project goes on, I think.
Leo, I don't know if you're seeing this one question that I'm looking at as well. And I think Lyndon in our audience also would love to, or one of our colleagues would also like to address this question as well. The question is from Aiden. Has there ever been a time when you, and actually Gigi as well, the three of you actually, has there ever been a time when you disagreed with the creative vision of other members of staff in your team, or in other cases across the group, let's say your clients? And if yes, how was that resolved?
Yeah, I think all the time people have just different opinions about things. Like for example, like on that first project I showed, like there's this one shot where there's like this puff of smoke and everyone hates it. I have no issue with it. And like now we're doing the foreign language versions and everyone just keeps like making fun of me about this puff of smoke and why I don't have issue with it. I'm like, I'm going to put it in this other version because like, I don't mind. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but I'm just saying that like, you're going to have disagreements with things, but I think everyone should be open to listening to everything. Cause that's where like the sum of like everything is better than like one opinion. And then and in terms of like difference in opinions with creative, like with your client, yeah, you definitely have, like I had no issue with the explosions themselves, not even from like I don't want to do this. It's really hard taking out all these fiery bits of explosion and all this interactive lighting. Like, regardless of how much work that is, like I personally didn't have an issue with it, but they did. And like, they're paying for it. So you're going to have to like, you don't have the final say. And I think that's a hard time sometimes, like being in our position, because you are a vendor, like you're a creative partner for sure, but you're also getting paid to do something. So in the end, you can argue your case. And there's been times like with different projects where, you know, you push and push and push and you're like, make your case. Like, I think it'll look better like this. And you might be able to convince them. But if it's the client and it's not like the advertising agency, like they'll argue their case. But then like, those are the people that are paying the money for everything. So like the power dynamic kind of changes. And then, you know, you can't get like too precious or attached to things, because it's almost like if you want to make something, yeah, it's hard because you spend a lot of time, you know, working on this project, but there's a lot of other voices and opinions involved, like on the client side, that you have to take into account as well.
Thank you, Gigi. And then Leo, I'll defer to you next. And then Lyndon, if you wanted to jump in as well, one of our wonderful hosts will also address this question.
Yeah, disagreeing on creative decisions, I think is natural, because everybody is a creative. Everybody has unique ideas. I think as long as everybody's that the table's open to hear, but working within your time constraints, I think is the most important part. Like there has to be one voice that kind of like puts the stamp because of the time constraint.
Wait, sorry, what was there a question? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just having Leo address as well, his perspective.
Oh, okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lyndon, had you wanted to add something, or did I just entirely put you on the spot?
You kind of put me on the spot a little.
I'm so sorry.
I mean, I can answer the question. Can you repeat it for me?
Well, just, was there ever a time when maybe your perspective on a project or the creative on a project differed from that of your colleagues or fellow staff members, and how did you approach that and manage that conversation?
From my perspective, that has happened to me a couple of times. I would say, like when doing like recruitment, you know, I would have like a specific goal, and you know, maybe like the partner, someone that I'm partnering with, may have like an idea or something that could help with recruitment for like the neon groups. And then you know, sometimes their like opinions aren't always, it's not always the best. And sometimes when I do follow up with like what they want me to do, I won't like receive that like good results. So it's happened a lot to me. So I'm kind of used to it. So I know what works and what doesn't work. So like when I hear it from other people and they're like, hey, maybe you should try this. And, you know, I know it personally won't work for me. So I don't know. I kind of just roll with the flow sometimes. You know, even if I know it's not going to work, I'll try to do it just to satisfy, you know, like the partners or whoever it is. That's what I do from my perspective.
Lyndon, and thanks for letting us put you on the spot.
Sure, no problem. Anytime.
We do have a couple more questions before we wrap up on this lovely afternoon. Henry was wondering, for someone, and Gigi, this sort of extends upon our question that we had earlier today. For someone interested in going into VFX, what could one do besides going to school for VFX? Do you have other avenues and suggestions with which to approach, you know, let's say in this case, compositing? outside of going to school for it?
Well, I didn't go to school for it. I didn't get into this industry by going to school. I mean, I took a After Effects class and I ended up doing a couple of internships, but I worked my way up like at the mill from, this like dispatch department and just, I think you can still, I mean, Framestore has like internship opportunities. They have, in London, they have like a launch pad. I don't think we have a launch pad because we have our internship. But a lot of times, like in the VFX industry, like we'll hire runners. It's kind of weird now with COVID because the runners are like PAs and they do stuff around the office. Like they run errands, they do client services when clients are in. So it's a little bit weird right now because no one's in the office, but that's how people would get their start as well. They like just get in the door and they start working. They express interest in the department that they want to go into. And then they start doing like a little bit of work and then they just, get promoted in that department. So I think if you're interested in going to VFX, if you could do it that way, like just apply for an entry-level position in a company and then try to work your way up the ladder that way. I think a lot of people, as myself included, I think I really appreciate people who don't, I mean, I also appreciate people who've gone to school for visual effects, but I like, the scrappy upstarts that just come in and they're like, oh, I want to learn. And, you're excited and you show interest and you show that you're a hard worker. And I think you can definitely find a way that way.
A question came in from Ariel, who asked, have you ever worked on a project that was approved by the client, but then was scraped after airing for negative feedback, such examples such as for moral, ethical, or social reasons?
Oh yeah, I don't think I personally worked on one. I mean, there's definitely really problematic ones. I did one time, a long time ago at the mill, they had gone through, I think it was for like a Bank of America commercial. They'd gone through and they shot all of it and we were in the post phase. And then it got to the point where I think the client just didn't like that concept anymore. And then they were like, no, thanks. And then it was just gone. So we hadn't even finished anything. And I was like doing some tests, but like the concept itself, they were like, we don't like it anymore. And it was mind boggling to me because they had just spent like millions of dollars shooting it. And they're like, no. And then, but I can't remember. I don't think I've worked on anything that was finished, gone to air, and then was like recalled for any reason. Yeah, I don't think so. If I think of it, I'll mention it again later in the 15 minutes that we have.
I guess I'll jump in with the next question. We were obviously talking about burnout and sort of like balancing, a healthy work-life balance, getting some sleep, obviously, as well. Gerson was wondering, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Gerson, what are some of your favorite activities to do when you feel stressed or experience burnout? Gigi, I know you've touched upon some of these activities earlier in a different context and would love to have you name them again.
Yeah, I like exercising. I go exercise at this gym that I go to that does like these kind of HIIT classes with like strength training, and then I meditate, I do yoga, read. But most of the things, if I'm feeling stressed out or burnout, like I feel much more calmer if I do something physical.
Give me a second. It just left me. Give me a second.
Okay.
I guess wanted to get a sense, we're obviously in a more optimistic place on the other side of the pandemic. I'm hopeful that it sort of continues to be that way. Mm-hmm. And I do kind of like to ask a lot of our talent who visit us within this space, what are some coping mechanisms that you do in order to as you're working from home, like how do you balance that? I'm conscious so many of us have gone from this environment where we're all sharing the same space and we're all working together. And then we've also focused on these more isolated experiences now where we're sat at our computer all day. And how do you manage that? I'm conscious that it's not something that we all got used to very quickly.
You mean, how do you manage like working from home or from, I think, yeah, I think,
abbreviated way of saying it. Thank you.
I think there's like a lot of positives to working from home for me anyway, just like, cause I don't have the commute time anymore. But I do miss working with my teammates, even though we have, a Google chat and we have like daily video calls. I think you can feel like kind of isolated at times, but I think I don't know, I just lost my train of thought. In terms of like the response to pandemic and everything, I think it can be really anxiety inducing, obviously, even though I don't think we're out of it yet, because of the variants and whatnot. And it's hard to not feel anxious about things. But I remember reading something or just remembering this about just knowing knowing that you can't control other people, you can only control what you do. So like whatever you can do to make yourself feel safe and not anxious or like comfortable, then like, because you can't really change other people and what they do. So you only have control over, I remember at the beginning of the pandemic when it was like really anxiety producing to even go to the grocery store, and then people not wearing masks and stuff like that. But like, yeah, you can't control whether or not other people can do that. You can only control what you do for yourself. And then yeah, it is hard working from home too, because there's like there's a merging of this like work life and personal space. Because I had a desk in my room a while ago that I had thrown out like a couple years ago, so I didn't have a desk to work at. So now my computer and everything is set on my kitchen table, so I don't have a kitchen table anymore. And so it's right there, it's very obvious there isn't like a separate room for it. But what I do enjoy is being able to, in the middle of the day, if I wanted to, I could go take a walk, or meet with a friend for lunch, or there's like a little bit more control over your schedule almost, but you need to be able to step away from your work at the end of the day. And sometimes you're like, oh, maybe I'll just go back for a little bit more. And I've been guilty of that, where I'm like, wait, what time is it? Like, why am I still working? But it's like right there, and you haven't made the commute home. So it would be easy to do that.
I just remembered my question. You made a lot of good points about just working from home that I feel very similar to. My question is, during the pandemic, I know a lot of people took it upon themselves to gain a new hobby, and a lot of it has been trying to get into post-production and learning how to composite through the help of YouTube and stuff like that. So someone who hasn't been to school, if they wanted to build their portfolio, what should they have in order to increase their chances?
I think definitely, if I'm looking at reels, people send their reels or their portfolio of work, I think it's better to like have fewer really good things than like lots of things. So I think even if you're, in terms of tutorials, I'm trying to think if there's any online, because you would need to, you see all those on Instagram or LinkedIn and stuff. There's this guy who does these really cute little compositing videos, where he'll do something and he like turns into a banana or something, and he like shoots all these videos of himself like doing certain things, and then people would be like, oh, how did he do it, you know? And then he would do a making of video, and they're very simple. They're not super complicated, but they're very effective. And I would say for like shots that you could put on your portfolio, you could, I'm trying to think of how you would get this content. I guess you would have to either shoot it or like maybe download some, I mean, people do mashups of different clips all the time. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, there are websites and where they can grab stock footage, which is free to use. There's quite a few of them, and they could build a portfolio from
Yeah.
there. Yeah, but would you care to see more kind of grading work, more of the roto skills, to kind of like just get them in the door?
Yeah, I think roto is hard. So like when I started out after dispatch, I moved into something called art support, which doesn't really exist anymore, which was like prepping files in Photoshop. And then I did like paint in roto. And I think the problem with that is a lot of the times these days, like companies outsource that work to like other companies, like say in India and everything. But I do think paint and roto is absolutely a necessary skill to have if you're going to be a good compositor. Because I think a lot of times with people coming in from school, from like studying VFX in school, they actually don't have those skills. And then they don't learn them because we're outsourcing all this work. But there's going to be a time, and it's happened to me, where like the outsource company is like, oh, we can't do this. Then you're like, what do you should be able to like start and finish a compositing shot on your own. Like I can still roto and paint. Like I have no doubt I can do it. Like, and there was a time, like I think I was, you know, in an MPC where like, yeah, they're like, we can't roto this. And I was like, I guess I'm gonna have to roto this, come in on the weekend and roto all this. And I knew it was gonna get done. And like, you should be like confident that you could do it yourself. And those are like very necessary skills. So like in terms of rotoscoping, I don't know how you could, I guess you could like show making of, like if you did roto, like rotoing people like running or walking or stuff, that's really hard. Rotoing people is really hard. So I would say like rotoing someone and like putting them on a different background or something would be like a good thing. Or like in terms of paint, it's like a lot of like TV shows in New York, like whenever, you know, for like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel or like all these other like pieces that are period pieces in different time eras, like a lot of the work is like removing air conditioners or removing things that aren't like part of that time period. So if you were to do a shot where you're like removing things and then you can show like a white like before and after, then that's a really good skill to have. I mean, that's something you always have to do. Remove this, like, is a thing that happens all the time. But I think those are really valuable skills that I think people coming out of like different programs, maybe they had a little bit of it, but they get actually thrown into just compositing. And that's great because then you like, you're faster tracked to become a compositor, but like then you kind of lack these necessary foundational skills. I think they are very foundational. And then, you know, I remember one time at the mill when I was rotoing, we had to do this Gatorade commercial where they had to color all the sweat and beads off this person. I made like over 1,000 roto mats for like all these sweat beads and stuff. And I was like, this is ridiculous, but I'm just gonna do it. And then one time, like they had to like stabilize this car shot and there's all this road missing, like, and I did that. And it's like, it's just skills that are, I think, really important if you want to be a really good compositor. I'm not saying that you won't be, but I think those are, you should, because then what are you going to do if like the outsource company can't do it and you can't do it? Like, how are you going to finish this? I don't know.
Thank you, Gigi. Beautifully said. And yeah, we really appreciate you sharing your insight. I'm conscious that I'm afraid we are out of time. I wish we had all the time, and we say this every week. So we're sorry that we have to cut this short, but it's been incredible sharing your wisdom, or having you share your wisdom and your insight, your vulnerabilities within this space. I know a lot of our participants really benefited from hearing your story, and including myself. And Leo, it's been a pleasure co-moderating with you. I don't know if you have any additional words you'd like to add.
No, this is great. I love having conversations. I think your energy was was felt. I think we had a lot of energy within the comments. We couldn't get to all the questions, but thanks, Gigi, for your time.
Well, thank you so much. I see there are a few other ones. Let me just answer you quickly. Does Mill do any internships? I don't know. I don't think so. Kat, do you know?
I would check their website because they are updating their open roles frequently.
Okay.
So they should have some in CG right now.
Aiden, if you were a hiring manager, who would you choose? Someone with great education, character, and skill, or someone with great portfolio? I don't know. It depends. Someone with a great portfolio could be not a great person. I don't know. I like someone who's like, I don't even believe you need to have like, you don't need to go to the best school either. I think if you have like a good personality and you're willing to like, you know, work and have a good work ethic, I think that speaks a lot. But I know a lot of, I don't do the hiring, so, but like in terms of portfolio work, I've seen people like put other people's work on their portfolio too. So that's not great. So you never really know with the portfolio whether or not it's true. Oh, thank you. The new Geico ad. Yeah, I haven't personally worked on, well, no, I did work on a little bit, but and I haven't been able to work on the Geico Gecko ads as much, but I do think they're really great.
They definitely are. Well, thank you so much once again, Gigi. And thanks everyone for having us this afternoon. And I will pass the baton back to Lyndon and to Natasha. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Gigi, Kat, and Leo. It was really amazing hearing from all of you, and as always, it would also be great for you to come back. We welcome you back anytime.
Absolutely. What an amazing presentation. I'm really taking away that idea of being present, finding inspiration in everything, making sure to take care of ourselves when we experience burnout, and focusing on the things that we can control. Just so many words of insight from Gigi this afternoon. I'm really grateful for all of that. Agreed that we would love for you to come back. Thank you, Kat and Leo, for co-moderating. We have come to the end though, so we will have to close today with a closing. We thought about our superpowers in the beginning of this group. So to close out, we're going to embody that superhero in ourselves, and we're just going to strike a pose that really represents that version of ourselves that is a superhero, that exhibits all of those superpowers that we shared. So we're going to count to 3 and we'll see what happens. Lyndon and I will do it on camera, and we trust that all of you will do it at home to the best of your comfort and ability. So are you ready, Lyndon?
I'm ready.
All right, on the count of 3, we will strike our superhero pose to bring us into the rest of our day. 3, 2, 1. And we can let that go. Awesome. So we hope everyone really carries that superhero self through the rest of your day and week. And we are super excited to see everyone next week for another mega group.
Well, it looks like we've come to the end of today's mega group. So as always, please remember to stay connected with TAP through our website, as well as our social media. And again, thank you for joining the Made in New York Animation Project Mega Group. Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.